So today's session is on the secrets of community-led growth and why most communities fail. I'm super excited to have our guest expert on today. But before we jump into that, let's just go through a couple of housekeeping items just to get this out of the way. With the first point being probably the most asked question in the history of all webinars, which is, are we recording this and will it be made available? The answer is yes. I'd say 95, 98% of the time, we record these sessions and make it publicly available. Very rare instances do we only do specific sessions only for our portfolio companies, but this one is being recorded and will be published on our Mucker blog within a few days' time. Don't worry, you guys will get access to it. And if you want to be notified as soon as possible, make sure you subscribe to receive our email notifications at mucker.com. And the second one is we will be addressing questions from the audience, from you guys, throughout the presentation, as well as near the end. If we do have some extra minutes, we'll get to questions that we weren't able to get to. If you want to drop your questions into the Q&A box, not the chat box, put it into the Q&A box so our team can monitor those questions as they come in, and we'll try to address them on the spot. All right. So those are two housekeeping items. Let me address or introduce myself if you are joining us for the first time. So I'm Tony. Nice to meet you all. I run the growth practice here at Mucker, which just basically means I spend most of my time working directly with the founders within our portfolio companies. Mucker is an early stage venture capital firm. We focus on seed and Series A, and we invest in pretty much various different types of industries, markets, and all over the world. But really, the star of our show today is Sam Jacobs. He's the founder and CEO of Pavilion. And I've been a member of Pavilion for even before it was called Pavilion, back in the day when it was called something else, Revenue Collective. And fun fact, for those of you who are part of Mucker, I actually got my current job at Mucker through Pavilion.
Let's go.
Yeah, so I have a warm place in my heart for Pavilion, still a member today. And Sam didn't ask me to do this, but if any of you are in go-to-market or are in go-to-market or are in that space, if you're not a member, you should go sign up. That's definitely worth it. Okay. Sam, super excited to have you. And this topic is, especially in today's world where everything's AI and agents, I just feel like there's an opportunity to be authentic in communities. And even with AI these days, and we won't go into all the nitty gritty, but certain communities also are referenced by AI today. Like we did a webinar end of last year on Reddit. Super excited to have you talk through your experience, your point of view on community-led growth. So, Sam, the floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you. And that's great to see all of you, at least in the chat. I'm calling to you today from Barcelona, Spain. And we're going to be talking about community-led growth. I was literally just the previous call I was on. By the way, Tony, you can interrupt at any time and ask any question you want. So this should be as interactive as is possible. You all joined for a reason. There's some piece of information or insight you're probably hoping to get, and I want to make sure that you get value from the conversation. But the most recent webinar I just did an hour ago was about what's happening in go-to-market. And what we're seeing is that win rates for companies that invest in community and invest in meaningful, authentic in-person experiences, as opposed to just trade shows, win rates for sort of trust-based interactions, which is effectively what community represents, are much, much higher. And so if you're thinking about how do you grow, I think that this is probably a pretty salient topic, because in a world of AI noise where, even everything is clearly written or contributed by some kind of Gen AI or LLM, the way that people are winning the most interesting deals at the highest rate is in places like community. And again, I think the underlying theme is trust. Is where can you build a real meaningful relationship with another human being? So to the extent anybody on the call is thinking about growth and thinking about hitting their revenue targets and building pipeline, I think this is a worthwhile conversation, whether you start your own community or whether you invest in other communities which may exist. So let's start with some misconceptions, and then we can talk about what makes when they work and how communities when they work, what makes them work. You can imagine what on the screen is the inverse is obviously going to be what makes them work. But I think the biggest thing that I would underscore for community is it is It's closer to a brand investment than a demand generation investment. And what I mean by that is brand is a long-term demand generation investment. A lot of founders and CEOs struggle with brand because we're all used to hitting monthly or quarterly revenue targets. We need to. We're presenting to people like Tony every quarter in the board meeting, and it's imperative that we deliver those results. At the same time, we can't not invest in brand because over the long term, brand is what creates trust, which is what creates improvements through our funnel in terms of conversion rates. And ultimately, it's long-term it's a long-term demand generation. Community is very similar. You have to approach it from a perspective of not taking a short-term view, but taking a long-term view. The more you try to tweak it to be a near-term demand generation engine, the more likely you are to make some mistakes because the essence of community, again, using that word that you'll hear me say a lot today, is trust. And if you treat all of the participants, as it says on the screen, like a growth channel, if you immediately try to sell to people, if you have your account executives or your salespeople join, and Pavilion is not the only one, there's lots of communities out there. If you have them join these communities simply to prospect, you're doing some damage to your brand. You're eroding trust, and it's not really going to work as well. The funny thing about communities is if you invest in them with a longer term perspective, which is basically the idea articulated on the screen. If you invest in them from a retention perspective, from a trust-based perspective, they tend to deliver very meaningful results. If you treat them as a demand generation channel, a wet t-shirt to be squeezed, to be wrung dry, then ultimately you're gonna do yourself some short shrift. So that's, I think fundamentally, you should think about any investments, again, whether you're putting your own people into like relevant ICP communities or whether you are building your own, which is a very good strategy. But the people that build their own take a very long-term view and they sell not by selling, but by being helpful and supportive to the members, which sounds a little woo, a little loosey-goosey, but it really is the thing that makes the meaningful difference. If you have long-term goals, and you can have long-term goals around pipeline generation, but if you have long-term goals, they tend to work. If you have short, near-term goals, I didn't get one good lead from this community. I've been saying hi to people for 20 days or 30 days. Ultimately, that perspective is what's not going to help you and serve you very well. So also, I think to the extent that it's important, there's a big difference between audience and community. And I think there's lots and lots of people that assume that the accumulation of a set of emails and sending a newsletter is community. And as a purist, I suppose, I would say that my perspective is that if it's one-to-many communication where you're communicating your ideas but not receiving anything in return, that is not a community, that's an audience. By the way, audiences are great, but communities are really interesting and more powerful when the participants talk to themselves. You know that you have a community when you don't actually have to moderate every single conversation, but when members of the community are connecting with each other to support and help each other. And that's really the key difference. There's other things that you see on the screen, but I think the other way that you know it's a community is do the members themselves identify as being members of the community. If I get somebody's newsletter, I don't that doesn't mean that I self-identify as being part of their community. It only means it's only a community for me if I'm interacting with other participants and I self-identify as, in my case, a Pavilion member. So that's important because the stance that you take and the asks that you make of people are going to emerge from how you treat them and whether you view them as an audience, meaning it is their job to consume your ideas, or whether you treat them or view them as a community where it's really your job to create a space, whether digital or in person, where they can interact with each other and trust that by so doing, you are building your own brand as a facilitator of those connections. And that's candidly that's how Pavilion emerged. I think what's on the screen is really the big message, I would say, which is it's a retention engine. And it's a retention engine because of the identity that you are capable of helping establish and build for members. And what that means, again, all of this in the same way that content marketing, especially ungated content marketing, was in some ways revolutionary. Maybe that's an aggressive word, but it was uncommon. And it was uncommon because ungated content marketing, to the point of Tony publishing, what we're about to talk about on the Mucker blog in a couple of days, ungated content marketing is a gift to the market without requiring anything in return. And if you are a traditional short-term focused demand generation marketer, that might be a big problem for you because you have near-term pipeline targets. But the benefit is that you establish trust. And over time, that you can convert that trust into all of the things that drive your business, like revenue, like pipeline and retention. But it just takes a little bit longer and it takes a perspective that you're not going to be transactional in the relationship. Community, when done well, does all of those things as well. It's very similar, right? So if you have a purpose, and we're going to go into what the key elements are, like how do you build a great community? What are the key elements, to the point of why we're all on the webinar today? What is it about communities that make them resonant? And I think you see on the left side of that screen, builds identity. That's a really important part of what makes a great community. If you can stand for something, and again, to the extent that you're a software company and you want this effectively this affiliated group of possible customers and prospects that you can interact with, that you can market to, that you can share messages with. If you want that and you want to build trust, then the group itself needs to stand for something more than just the idea of purchasing your software. And that's where there's a little bit of a blurry line between kind of user groups or customer advisory boards and communities themselves. But at the heart, what they should do is provide value and service to the membership so that there's a sense of identity that's developed as a function of being part of a community. So that will tend to speak to, if we're thinking about V2MOM, Benioff's framework, if we're thinking about vision and values, it will tend to speak to that top part of the vision and values part of your strategy, meaning your software, your company exists for a specific reason because you believe a thing about the world. The community will probably relate to that thing that you believe about the world, whatever it may be. Pavilion, as an example, we believe and we stand for operators, for people that report to founders and CEOs, but are not themselves founders and CEOs. And we spent a lot of time in the early days informing and educating our members on their executive compensation capabilities. What are the Bill of Rights that they should understand before they take on a new role? And that belief system is what created a sense of identity among the Pavilion members, that Pavilion was not just trying to help them employ or engage with smart tactics in their day-to-day job, but it was also about a sense of belief that we existed to level the playing field for go-to-market operators in a very meaningful way. If you're a customer success software platform, you might believe that customer success is underinvested in. And so your community, which is, by the way, there's one of the famous customer success communities is called Gain, Grow, Retain. And that was really well managed. And that was really started by, I think it was called Higher Logic, but it was started by a software company. But the connection wasn't always as explicit and transparent as, again, not that we don't love demand generation, but as a demand generation marketer or frankly a salesperson would want. There was not always a direct link. It wasn't that every other day you were getting a message to sign up for the software platform. It was nurtured and supported with the idea that over the long term it would drive prospects and customers. So let's talk about some of the failures. What are the mistakes, the most common mistakes that people make when they're trying to build community? And by the way, just in case it's not clear, the reason I am an expert on all of these things is because I've made these mistakes. So I am not better than anybody that's listening. I am a victim of many of these. And so I can speak with very direct and precious experience about some of these challenges. Okay, so the number one mistake that you make is that you don't have a clear ICP, which is probably the same mistake you would make in your go-to-market motion for your software product, right? And what that specifically means, particularly as your community grows in interest, is that you let too many different kinds of people join. Everywhere we see, and I see, the number one mistake I made with Pavilion was letting too many different kinds of people join too early. And we had a very clear ICP at the beginning, and then it became a little bit more diffuse, right? And that weakens the experience for everybody else because fundamentally, what you're trying to create with a community is a trusted conversation. You're trying to bring people together so they can share common experiences. But if there is no common experience, if there is no shared experience, if the people have different motivations and incentives, if some of the people are consultants trying to sell to the other people in the community, and some of the people are founders of the category and they build software of the category that community exists to support, and then you have actual operators that are trying to solve real problems in that category, there's a conflict. There's a conflict, and ultimately it erodes trust. And again, that word is so important because in a world of AI, every single action we take either enhances or erodes trust. And I have to be very cognizant. We as a community, we as a group of leaders, we have to be very cognizant that every action we take, it either enhances or erodes trust. So the number one failure, too many different kinds of people. It's very funny. I got a message from a guy in London one time who was starting a running club, and I think he called it like VC Running Club. And I like to run, so he was asking me about the lessons learned from building Pavilion. And he said, I'm getting some interest in this running club, but not everybody's exactly a VC. Some of them are private equity, some of them are just operators. What do you think I should do? And this is extremely niche, this TAM, this total addressable market. VCs in London that like to run. Maybe it's not that niche, but certainly it's pretty specific. And I said, I think that you wanted to call it VC Running Club. I think you need to tell the people that are not VCs that unfortunately it's not for them and that they should start a GTM operator running club if they wanted to. And he came back to me a couple months later. He said that was the best advice I received because I had a sense that I wanted it to be bigger. By the way, that's why you're going to let all these people in. That's why you're going to stray from the ICP because you're going to want growth. You're going to say, isn't 5,000 people better than 1,000 people? Aren't 500 people better than 100? And I think we have to be very careful about how quickly we grow communities. Again, think about it as a brand investment. Think about it as an investment in the trust of the message that you put out to the market and whether you can be trusted as an organization in an authentic way. So if you grow too quickly, you erode the trust. The biggest mistake, although you can sign up online for Pavilion, but the biggest mistake I've made running Pavilion is creating that self sign up. And when we're actively talking about removing it, because how can you have an exclusive club if anybody can join it by just signing up online? So lesson number one is no clear ICP. So
Just out of
let's,
curiosity, Sam,
yeah.
how do you guys go through new members then today? There's no
Well,
self-sign up.
the original way that we did it was that everybody had to apply and you had to be interviewed. Then we went through a period where we created self sign up and I raised money. And I made this mistake of chasing growth, and the ICP faltered. And we even did things like discounts. So we would do like discounts for if you were unemployed, we would do a discount. It was classic short-term thinking versus long-term thinking. And the quality of the community was a little bit diluted. And beginning in January, first thing we're going to do is we've instituted a wait list. So if you're not ICP, we put you on a wait list. And we're intentional about saying Pavilion is designed for in-seat go-to-market operating executives. And if you are a fractional consultant, a service provider, these are all people that used to not be able to join at all. They go onto a wait list. And we have a sales team. We have an enrollment team that is helping people get enrolled if they're not sure how to do it. But self sign-up still does exist. It's just that we route you to a specific flow if you're not ICP. But at some point in the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to turn that off too. And we're really just going to be focused on these are the people that we think should be in the community, and I'm going to take my own medicine and my own advice.
Yeah. I know it might be slightly different because your business is the community, and a lot of our founders, it's their focus or their business is selling software or AI or what have you. What kind of recommendation would you give if a founder or a startup has different types of ICPs that may not necessarily have a lot of perceivable overlap? Let's say you sell to e-commerce and then as one ICP, and then there's another one for commercial banking, perhaps. And
So I think two things. The first, and there's two options here. The first is center on the pick the ICP that represents the plurality of your customer base. Most people, each of those doesn't buy equally. There's probably a core use case or a core ICP. The second thing I would say is align, make it very clear in your messaging and in the kinds of conversations that you curate and the content that you curate or create that there is some common theme. Yes, we're from different backgrounds, but we're here to talk about X, Y, and Z because that's common across all of these. And make sure that you enforce that commonality and make it very clear. One of the most famous communities, I suppose, is this organization called Chief. Chief is for female executives, it's for women. Now, women, there's in chief, there's the head of the general counsel for American Airlines, and there's the head of HR for SAP, and then there's the senior vice president of merchandising for Saks Fifth Avenue. They're not talking about the functional aspects of their job every day. What they're talking about is what it means to be a female professional facing the kinds of challenges that they face. So that's okay if one filter of the ICP doesn't self-identify against those different filters, but you need to make it clear what the shared experience is.
Perfect. Thank you.
Related, Chief believes that all women should be chiefs and have an opportunity to ascend to the C-suite, and that there shouldn't be discrimination against women, and that women should have the same opportunities that men do. Pavilion believes that a couple of things. Pavilion believes that operators should have a more level playing field when compared to investors and CEOs and founders. And Pavilion also believes, interestingly enough, that P&L fluency, financial literacy, is a missing skill set for most go-to-market executives. And we believe, and I believe, that I need to educate the go-to-market community on how to think about the world from the perspective of the CFO or from the perspective of a CEO and founder so that I can extend their tenure. But the point is, and of course, Weight Watchers is a community. CrossFit is a community. Strava is, to a certain extent, a community. There needs to be something that people believe, and that thing cannot or should not just be that the founder of the community, the software company that sponsors the community, is the world's greatest thing since sliced bread. There needs to be some belief system. Doesn't have to be, but that's what resonates with people. That's what people want. We've been building communities since we came down from the trees as from chimpanzees onto humans and Homo sapiens and all of that. And the point is, we've had religions are communities. The church is a community. So this is a very common thing for people to want to belong to something greater than themselves. But you need to articulate it and give it to them. You need to make sure that there's a reason that you exist that's deeper than buy my software. That sounds obvious, but again, I look around at other communities and it's not clear to me that it's obvious. That's what people identify with. What was it that was the spark for Pavilion? One of the sparks was that, and again, I know that there's some founders on here, so if I've equipped your employees with information you didn't want them to have, I apologize. But one of the sparks was that I was teaching go-to-market executives how equity worked and how asking for more wasn't always the right message. Sometimes it was negotiating for milestones or understanding double trigger acceleration or understanding extended exercise period. Pavilion was known as a place that was going to equip people because we had a belief system about the world that there was an 18-month average tenure for most go-to-market executives, and that was too short. And we wanted to extend that tenure, and we wanted to empower go-to-market executives and go-to-market operating executives. That obviously, whatever your belief system is, and again, it's going to relate to the V's, vision and values. It's going to relate. There's a reason you created the company that you created, and that's probably going to be the same reason that the community exists, even though the thing that the flow from the vision and values was you creating that software. The other adjacent result was that the community exists, and they can have the shared belief. And if they believe those same things, they're going to end up buying your software anyway because you created a set of alignment around that perspective. Okay, curation, very important, right? I'm sure there's somebody on the call that has started a community and really was a Slack workspace, which by the way, we use Slack too. So there's no shame in that, but no curation. And not just curation in terms of stimulating conversation. Hey, does anybody know a recruiter in San Luis Obispo? Here's an interesting little tidbit for you. It's the free version of Slack when I started doing this 9 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago. Most communities just worked on the free version, which didn't have message history. But why did I upgrade? I didn't upgrade for message history. I didn't really care about message history, to be honest with you. I cared about the naming convention of all of the people in the community. So it sounds weird, but we had a naming convention where, because you'd sign up for something and if my name's Sam Jacobs, it would be S Jacobs 0719, or it would be Sam J 1977. And that, if you believe in broken windows theory, that looked like shit. It didn't look good. It looked messy. It looked too anonymous. And that eroded trust. So the original reason that I upgraded to the paid version of Slack was so that I could change the display names. And so I changed the display names to first name, last name, and then the city, the airport code of the city where they lived. And so, of course, mine was Sam Jacobs NYC. But that's the point. So curation takes a lot of forms. One is, how do people present themselves? Do you encourage them to upload a profile picture? Of course you must, because if they're on a digital platform and nobody knows who they are, all of the things you're doing are trying to convey, as it says, signal so that people have trust. That word's going to come up again and again because what you're trying to establish is trust. And in this sense, it's trust through hygiene. It's trust through the fact that you have an SLA that when somebody asks a question, you tag people or you try to get that question answered. You go off and you make sure that the synapse fires. Because what happens is the thing can become self-sustaining, but if you don't encourage those synapses to fire, if you don't help those people get their questions answered, if you don't tag Joe when Sally asks a question, pretty soon, and it doesn't take very long, pretty soon people are watching. And the minute that the signal falls, it's almost logarithmic, but it's almost exponential. It decays at a half-life. It's like a radioactive particle or something like that. And its half-life is very short. And so you'll think that the community is being well run. It's very similar to a garden. It needs to be pruned, it needs to be tended to, and then it can operate on its own. But if you let it go, and again, that means how you name things, what kinds of places you create, whether that's a room, a physical space, whether that's a digital space, but all of it is tight control and norms around behavior, expectations around behavior. Remember that if you're creating this space, you have every right to tell people how they're allowed to behave. One of the great, and Tony might have been a member of MSP, that was one of the great original listservs, modern sales pros. And Pete Kazanji was the guy that started it. And he was extremely aggressive to the point of public shaming of anybody that tried to solicit or pitch within the community because he understood that the minute you let it go a little bit, that's when things get really bad. And all of a sudden, everybody tunes out.
Yep.
I'm seeing some stuff in the chat. Oh, this is a good observation. Thank you, Christian. I believe you're the one from Chile. Maya asks, what's your perspective on strong community identity vis-a-vis membership tiers? Does that dilute community identity? I don't think so. I think there's two pieces, and the way that I typically do presentations is I say the thing that's on the next slide before I've even flipped to the next slide because I wrote the next slide as a result of the natural consequence of whatever it is I'm about to say. But nevertheless, tiers are actually a good thing because the other part that you need, and I'm sure we'll get to it, is status and recognition. That's a really important part of community. Everybody wants to believe you have to find a way. This is why founding member is a thing. The reason founding member is a thing is because people want to know that if they contribute at the beginning, it's the same reason that we have freshman, sophomore, junior, senior for school. It's because we seek a status symbol to convey that we are different or special, even within the broader tribe. So I don't think there can be an overarching belief system that like this is what we believe and this is why we're here. And it can also still be that, and nevertheless, these are the people, these are the wise elders of the group. These are the people that have walked the furthest. We're going to listen to them first before the people that are newest contribute. I think that's totally fine. And again, that's what people want. That's what people want. They want status and recognition. And the biggest mistakes that I've made when I've been building community is the way that Pavilion specifically works is it's a bunch of resources that if you've never had them before, they're pretty amazing. The first time they blow you away. CRO school, CMO school, these are for chief marketing officer, chief revenue officer. The first time you get it, it's wild because there is no good. I think Wharton does something and Cambridge does something, but it's very theoretical, and the people that are teaching them haven't been an actual CRO in 30 years. So we're teaching from actual operators. So the minute that it happens for you, you're blown away. And then what happens traditionally is you come to me or somebody on my team and you say, I want to be more involved. What can I do? And if I don't have a good answer, and for a long time I didn't have a good answer, if I don't have a good answer there, it's not that you don't stay a passionate fan. You don't stay that way. You decay. Your enthusiasm decays. You want to get super involved. You want to start referring people. You want recognition from the organization and support. Again, remember that as people contribute, as people become involved, you want to confer upon them status because that for them helps them separate themselves from everybody else. And when we do a good job, we are good at establishing status. And when we fall down, it leads to churn. Okay, no structured interaction. That's similar to the last point. As it says, that was the naming convention. That was make sure that people have specific names. I'll tell you about the next slide is about digital only versus in person. Obviously, you can imagine that I'm going to talk about the importance of in person, but I'll talk about rituals. Again, rituals convey structure, they convey curation. People want to be told what to do, and they actually like it. I remember going to a YPO meeting. YPO is Young Presidents Organization, probably the canonical executive organization of the last 100 years, I would say. And it's a very strange thing. It's a very strange place. They have a vice chair of education and a vice chair of learning, and they have all these very strange titles and designations, and it means so much to the members. And it's that ritual, it's that idiosyncrasy that you create, as we've done in our organizations, as we do in our companies. When we create those funny, interesting rituals, that's what resonates with people. So part of that is, for example, we host lots of dinners. Pavilion hosts about 300 to 350 salon style Jeffersonian dinners. We call them operator dinners every year. And they got started. And it's a pretty straightforward format, but we make sure to emphasize it, which is there's an introduction. We talk about no crosstalk, which means within the context of the dinner, there's not multiple conversations. There's only one conversation. There's a moderator. We have an introduction where we go around the table and talk about everybody's challenge and everybody shares a fun fact. And then we always say structured conversation through appetizers and entrees. And then after entrees, as the wine flows and as desserts appear on the table, then everybody can mix and match. But the point is, people feel like they're being guided. They're being guided. People do not want to feel like they have to make it up on their own. That's why people, introverts like me, that's why we don't like regular, and I'm actually an ambivert. But the point is, when I'm feeling introverted, I really don't want to walk into a big empty space, a big crowded party, and figure out who I'm supposed to talk to. And we've all been to those events where we walk in and it's not very welcoming. And that's not what we want from our community. Because by the way, the opposite is so powerful. There are lots of people, I've been around hundreds and hundreds of dinner tables where you see the person that hasn't spoken in 45 minutes and you point the camera to them and you say, Tony, you've been a little quiet. What challenge are you working on over there? And you would think that maybe that person would have nothing to say. It turns out they've just been waiting for somebody to ask them, and they come to light. So, what is all of that to say? Think about structure. Think about curation, moderation, structure. Think about how you name things. Think about how many options you give people. If it's a digital community, here's another important lesson. Slack's great. There's lots of platforms, and I am not the, I'm sorry if anybody works at Salesforce on the call, but that they're not my favorite company in the world. And they've adopted a lot of the commercial practices that Slack that Salesforce has since they acquired them. But the point is, it's easy to make it messy. And you have to have a recipe for how many different types of spaces you create for people to interact. And you don't want too many and you don't want too few. And that's part of the structure that you provide. Within Pavilion, there was one part of our journey where we had a Slack for enterprise healthcare sales and a channel for SMB and SureTech. And those what you don't want in those moments is you create too small a space and nobody shows up. Nobody goes to that party. You want the idea of a bustling environment. And one of the sort of funny metaphors I think about it is like the Gatsby mansion. If you watch like Baz Luhrmann's Great Gatsby, you want every room you walk into to be full of interesting people, and you don't want there to be too many rooms, but you want there to be enough that every room feels vibrant. So structure is important. Without structure, there's no connection. And as I said, the signal within your community has a decaying half-life. Once it goes away, it's very hard to reignite.
How do you maintain that structure? And is that something that you introduce up front when new members join and like
Very
moderators you
prescriptive,
brought up? Yeah.
very prescriptive onboarding. Again, very prescriptive onboarding and that's where you have to have the confidence to impose ritual. That's where you have to have the confidence to say, this is how we behave here. This is how we behave here, and this is what you're expected to do. And by the way, if there's a screening process, if you're not prepared to do those things, then maybe it's not for you. The key, and Jahan asked this question, what are 3 to 4 key steps and how important is content in that process? I think the most important thing is the clarity. Again, it's what we're saying, right? It's there has to be a reason the community exists and everybody has to understand it so that at least we can all identify around that shared belief system. From there, once they join, you have to have a very prescriptive onboarding process. And that is, again, something that we have learned the hard way. It is not choose your own adventure. It is take these 4 steps, and after you take those 4 steps, you should see success. And by the way, I know most of you, community is not your business, but it is a part of your brand investment, as we said. But you want to be very one of the counterintuitive insights that I realized over the last couple of years is more is not better. More is not better. It's a very big reason of churn is people feeling like they're not, quote unquote, getting the full value. They're like, there's just too much stuff going on, and I didn't go to any of the dinners, and I didn't go to that thing, and so you want to be extremely prescriptive. And I would really encourage everybody to think about a small number of high value interactions as opposed to overwhelming people with tons of crap. That's what I would say. There was another interesting question. That's good, just good conversation within the chat. Okay. Great for Pavilion because we didn't have to do anything in person and everybody was at home, and that was great for our margins. But sadly, that is not the world that we're going to operate in going forward because people are craving authentic, meaningful in-person interactions. I think people probably saw it was like a tweet on X about all of these new in-person startups. Maybe some of you are running them. One of them, I forget what it's called, but my sister-in-law actually does it. It's a group of 5 people that meet, or 10 people that meet for dinner in a strange city. And I think they're at a couple hundred million in ARR. But the point is, there's a whole structure to how these people meet in person. And it's typically exchange students or people that are new to a foreign city and are looking to make friends. The point is, in person has to be part of what you're doing. It's where everything comes to life. And so again, it's not just in person, it's structured in person. It's really structured in person. It's in person with some fairly rules that are arbitrary. Arbitrary was the word I was looking for. With arbitrary rules that are annoying, like you have to take off your shoes at the entrance to the apartment, or everybody has to introduce themselves in a funny way, or you have to pick an animal that represents you, whatever it may be. It's structured in-person interaction with a guide that gives you a sense of belonging and purpose, that you're following along in the steps of some specific prescription. What are my thoughts about, I'm just going to the Q&A really quickly, Tony. What are the thoughts about gamification and leaderboards in community? I've been hesitant so as not to create too much competition or hierarchy. The pros outweigh the cons. The answer is absolutely, Maya. There should be gamification. Again, it doesn't have to be antagonistic. It can be celebratory, but just remember a key part of community is status and recognition. And I'm not trying to be manipulative, but that is a critical part of community is people feeling like if you have 50 members, that the first 20 were special in some way. A lot of times they're called like the OGs in various different communities. But when I've failed, it's because I haven't recognized those people enough. And when I've succeeded, it's because we celebrate those people. We put them on stage. One of the things you might do at a conference, or you might do at your next event. Hey, raise your hand if anybody's joined in the last 3 months, or raise your hand if you've been with us for more than 2 years. All of any indication of status and tenure and seniority plays well. It plays well. I would encourage it. Gamification, leaderboards. Hey, I run a go-to-market community. We should do more gamification at salespeople. They're so competitive. And again, it doesn't have to be adversarial. Okay, this is the point that I've just been making. Again, so to join a YPO, you have to actually submit the financials for your company. And you have to have your payroll has to be more than $2 million a year, or your revenue has to be more than, I don't know, $5 or $10 million a year, whatever it is. It's a pain in the ass. You want people to feel like they have to jump through some hoops, and you have to be willing to sacrifice growth for those hoops. That's just a way of saying be selective. I was asking ChatGPT because sometimes I felt like Pavilion used to be cooler when we were called Revenue Collective, which is what Tony remembers us as. And then we changed the name and I thought, can you make a cool club, a club that used to be cool again, like Bungalow 8 or something? And ChatGPT said something very insightful, I thought. They said, if people that canceled or people that left are not worried or wondering if they could get back in, then you don't have anything. The people that left have to think to themselves, I'm not even sure if I could get back in. So selectivity is important. There has to be status, there has to be meeting, there should be a wait list, there should be an interview process. Everything you do to make it feel like anybody can join is to your detriment, and that's related to the ICP focus. I think this is a failure. I think the word scale is a very dangerous word when it comes to community. And I saw my friend Albert Chun, who runs AI Circle, and he had obviously it's a popular community right now. Everybody's thinking about AI, and he said on LinkedIn, "We had a great 2025, and now it's time to scale." Nobody in your club wants to hear that. Nobody in your club wants to hear that. Nobody at Soho House wants to get an email that says, "We had a great month in June. 1,000 new people joined Soho House." Everybody thinks to themselves, "I can't even get a dinner reservation as it is. The co-working space is going to be completely crowded." So just understand that your channel for growth should be word of mouth, and you need to be very intentional about how you manage that growth. And it's one of the most famous communities is World 50. And World 50 is probably the archetype for a great business with a great community. And they do about 300 million in revenue and 150 million in EBITDA. What a great business, huh? Their LTV to CAC is, I think, 18 to 1. 18 to 1. What does it mean when LTV to CAC is 18 to 1? It means they're intentionally not investing in growth. That's what it means. It means they have a point of view on how quickly they should grow, and they're very careful about killing the goose that lays the golden egg. So when they feel like they're growing too quickly, they might start a new vertical. They might go into legal or procurement, but they're not going to grow the HR 50 to 100 because they know that it'll kill the value for everybody else. So just be very careful and make sure that everything you're doing, again, onboarding is critical about how do you drive and facilitate engagement and interaction. That is the thing that's going to create that dynamic word of mouth. There's another company, BNI. BNI is another very well-known business where everybody shares leads and they're based on chapters. Now they have 50% churn because it's SMB. It's a lot like dentists and hairstylists and accountants trading leads and trading introductions. So how on earth can they have a $100 million revenue business with 50% churn? That's because they have zero sales and marketing costs because everything is word of mouth. Everything is word of mouth. So everybody, you can have high churn if people feel like it's not for them, but the way communities grow fundamentally is members telling other members. And if that's not happening, it's really your unit economics are just probably not going to work. Norms, I've talked about this already. There have to be norms. You should kick people out. You should definitely kick people out. There's a question, how public should you make it? You should make it a little public. You should find you should see if you can, again, if it's an application process, you got to make sure that you reject some of the people. It has to feel like not everybody can just go and sign up. And again, I am the biggest violator of that, and we're going to fix that. But I'm telling you, learn from from my mistakes. So it's okay for you to say, this is how we behave here. In fact, people want it. People want it in the same way that children or your pets want structure and guidance, and you don't want your dog jumping up on the dinner table all the time. I was at a friend's dinner Passover Seder a couple weeks ago, and their dog just kept jumping up on the table. That's not okay. It's not cute. Anyway, the point is, they actually appreciate understanding and being told how to behave. And then when the one or two jerks that don't want to follow are removed, everybody appreciates it. Everybody actually appreciates it. So make sure that you have norms. This is how we do things. Joe, we don't interrupt. We don't interrupt within this community. So thanks very much for your comment, but let's just wait for Sally to finish talking. Especially true, these norms around speaking time and things like that when there's gender mix, because unfortunately for my gender, we tend to be loud and a little bit more obnoxious, and we want to make sure that there's even speaking time. So you have to enforce norms, or else there's gonna be people that feel like you're being underappreciative, even maybe discriminatory towards a specific identity if you're encouraging certain behavior that group doesn't normally act like. Okay, quite controversial here, and by the way, you can run a free community, but just don't make it so easy to sign up. It's okay if it's free if you have rules about who can join, but skin in the game. Went to a community event. Just looking at my watch to make sure I don't, because we only got about 10 minutes left, Tony.
Yep.
Yeah. I went to my favorite conference of the last couple of years was a CEO conference of community businesses. So I got to meet the CEO of Chief and the CEO of Vistage and the CEO of YPO and the CEO of BNI and Sam Parr, the CEO of Hampton. And here's something we all agreed on. Price, price is a feature. It is a value feature of community, which sounds weird, but it is. If people, Tiger 51, I think is like $50,000 initiate, or Tiger 21, sorry. People value the ability to spend on community because it is a status symbol. If everybody knows that it's 25,000 bucks to get into your community, then you know that everybody paid 25,000. That becomes a symbol to them of significance and meaning. That becomes part of their identity, that they are one of the people that could stay at an Aman hotel or join that specific community. So I would encourage you, one way or the other, it doesn't have to be that you charge money, but you should have friction. You should have some friction. If anybody can join, it will not have any significance. And you should be willing to trade your growth trajectory for the quality of engagement within the community. And part of that, again, I have a coach who he spent a lot of money on Tony Robbins stuff. And he says the fee is activates the energy. The people that pay, the act of paying is valuable for them. And that's counterintuitive if all of us grew up selling software. David has a question. We have a large LinkedIn group of 150,000, growing by 1,000 a month. That's great. A large percent complete an onboarding survey, and 96% say they want to connect with our solution partners. To your point on limiting members, we have segmented our members based on revenue and business size, but we don't exclude people. We've had over 250 online events. We have event, but the challenge we have is once people join our free private community, it's difficult to keep them engaged at a high level. So my suggestions or insights, first, I think, first of all, that's congratulations on having 157,000 people. That's awesome, David. My answer is, what are you solving for? If you're solving for size of the community, it sounds to me like you're doing everything right. If you want there to be high quality engagement, to the point of the slide, it doesn't have to be that you charge people, but I would look for opportunities to apply friction. That friction could be you have to apply and you turn people away. That friction could be that you have special kinds of events that have tickets associated with them or some kinds of fees. But if you want to drive engagement, the things that are going to drive engagement are sense of identity, clear understanding of ICP among the participants, moderation and curation so that there's no question that goes unanswered, and then some level of friction so that people feel bought into the process. That would be what I would say. No founder, no culture. What was another mistake I made? And I run like these, what you might consider to be like a niche community. For me, we tried to do a little bit of an M&A process at one time. And the problem with M&A and community is that if the leader of the community leaves, a lot of the times there's not a lot, it loses its soul. So I think if you're believe in this stuff, you have to show up. You have to be part of it. Within Pavilion, I teach a P&L fluency course every quarter. I teach an executive compensation course every quarter. So I teach a lot. I do one-on-one coaching calls where I'm helping people out with specific situations. I'm talking to members for me, it's just part of the business. And I just really think that it's not a thing that you can outsource, at least at the beginning. It has to have, and it's not on the screen here, but remember the world that we live in. We live in a world of more stuff, more content than any of us have ever seen in our lifetimes. There's more AI slop. There's more people sending emails. So we are trying to stand out. We are trying to establish some level of credibility and authenticity. And to do that, there has to be some idiosyncrasy. There has to be some strangeness. It has to be interesting. And that's going to come from you. That's going to come from you, the founder, deciding what is it about you that you want to put into this community to make it stand for something. That's the end. Any other questions? The one thing, yeah, go ahead,
We
Tony.
do have a question from Fred from the audience. This is more about the vehicle for maintaining community. He was specifically asking meeting members where they're at versus pulling them into a new medium like Slack. Let me also add a little bit of my own input into this or question. Even at Mucker, we run a Slack community for our founders. And internally, we've been discussing, hey, should we move over to Discord and use a Discord server for our community? What are your thoughts on the vehicle? Because earlier on, you brought on Modern Sales Pros. Yeah, I've been a member of that as well. That's a old school Google
An
email.
email list, baby. It was great.
Yeah.
I think it has to, I think there's like it's the needle to thread is you have an ICP. If your ICP is all Fortune 50 enterprises, then yes, Slack is probably not the right choice. Maybe you should do it on Microsoft Teams. So I think you figure out where's their alignment around the ICP, and then once you make that decision, you're unapologetic about it. That's what I would say. It looks like Tony might have frozen. Can you all hear me? Where can we seek consultation from Sam James outside this lecture? Anytime, my brother. You can email me, sam@joinpavilion.com, and I'll be delighted to help out. Tony, did you hear what I was saying?
No, I got dropped for a quick second
Oh,
there.
it's okay. I was saying the question about is Discord versus Slack. I think it's let's identify what's the demographic of your ICP. And I was saying if it's Fortune 50 companies and everybody just figured out what the internet was, okay, then maybe it's not Slack. Maybe it's Microsoft Teams, or maybe it's an email listserv. So it's make that choice based on your ICP. Discord probably works if you're investing in a bunch of early stage companies and cool product led or technical founders. But the point is, once you make that choice, then be unapologetic about it. So now Pavilion's on Slack. Somebody says they don't even let Slack exist in my company. I'm like, they should. You should find a way to do it because it's where the value is. So make the choice that aligns with your ICP, and then from there, be confident about asserting this is how we do it. Remember, norms. This is how we behave here. We're on Slack. I'm sorry if you don't like it. Tough beans. Then it's not for you.
Yeah, yeah. Let me ask a couple questions that I hear frequently with the founders I work with on a regular basis. One of them is, should I participate in existing communities that's already out there where my ICPs are congregating at, or should I start my own?
You should definitely, I think they're not exclusive. I don't, it's not either or. You should definitely participate with an open heart and an open mind in other communities that exist. If you're in go-to-market tech, you should be a great active participant in Pavilion. And if you're not, it's a waste. Now, you shouldn't sell in Pavilion, but just by being helpful and by being supportive and encouraging, you're going to find business your way. If you're an HR tech, you should be active in a community like Troop HR. You understand where I'm going with this, you have to be where your customers are. And the place to, and how you should behave is you should be helpful and supportive. That's what you should do. Now, I'm talking to a company called Ecosystem. I think building your own, if you have the stomach for it, because it should be a long-term investment. It should be a 5-year point of view that you have on the world, not hey, we put a Slack workspace together and a bunch of people joined and now it's dead and it's empty. If you're willing to put the time and energy in, and you're willing to let whoever runs that community sit in a way that you wouldn't hold your CMO accountable to brand investments, you have to have a long-term view. That doesn't mean don't measure anything. It just means don't ask them every 30 days how much pipeline did we get from it. Make it useful for the members and trust that pipeline will come over time.
Okay, let me ask one more question. How do you keep a community from just becoming like a help desk, support, where members are just going, hey, help me fix this? Or is that even a
Stimulate.
consideration that you should think about?
Yeah, you should. And the trick is be the host of an interesting conversation within your ecosystem. So that could be moderators, that could be content that you're publishing, that could be conversations that you're stimulating, that could be what you talk about at dinners. It's going to be hard to be a help desk if you invite all of your most active participants to a Jeffersonian dinner that you host at a really nice restaurant. Then obviously there's going to be a conversation that happens. The way that you keep it from becoming that is by anchoring around a higher level set of beliefs that are still endemic to the problem that you're trying to solve in the world.
Perfect. Cool. Okay, let's wrap up. Sam, thank you so much for this. I didn't even know you were going to offer this. This is great for anyone who's not already a Pavilion member. There you go. You could get 15% off your annual membership. So thank you for that, Sam.
Yeah.
It's
I would
really
say if you're a founder out there listening, I would more so than you joining, I would encourage your CRO, your CMO, your VP of sales, your VP of marketing. The big talking point I would share with you is I really think you should invest in your team. Invest in your team because we live in unprecedented times. They've never been precedented, but we definitely are unprecedented. And I think you want your sales and marketing organizations to at least be exposed to what's happening in the universe. That's what I would say.
Yeah. And again, like Sam didn't ask me to do this, but definitely join. There's a lot of value. I've been, again, a Pavilion member for a long time. They've got playbooks, templates beyond just being able to ask questions and get other people's feedback that are your peers. So definitely take advantage of this. Okay. Sam, how do people reach you? Can we flip back to the
Yeah, we
other
can flip
slide?
back. You can email me, sam@joinpavilion.com, and I'll answer everybody. And I'm happy. Somebody was saying, can you get a Sure, of course. I'll do 30-minute calls with anybody on here if it would be helpful for you.
Awesome. Sam, that's really generous of you. Okay,
Great
great.
to
We'll
meet
wrap up. And thank you, all of you, for joining us today. Hope you got a couple of different ideas on how to build your own community. Sam, super happy that you were able to participate in this with us. I'm a huge fan, obviously, and hopefully we'll do something again in the future. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you at the
Thanks,
next
everybody.
webinar.
Thank you so much. Bye.